One second, give me a minute.
बोलिए कैमरे उनके जो बच्चे आपको हमारा बच्चे जो आए करे
हाँ
बोला कैमरे जो बच्चे आ गए ना उनकी स्क्रीन नहीं बोली
या એટલે હું એની જોડે વાત કરતો
એટલે એને કીધું કે ફોન કર દે
હા અરે ભાઈ જોડે છલબી જો 3 કેબલ છે HDMI તમારો કેમેરો સેટ કરો અહીંયા હા સેટ કરો થેન્ક યુ તમને અહીંયા આપણે એક ફીડ આપે છે કોઈ આપણે જો ચલે
પેલું રિપબ્લિકન હિન્દુ કોએલિશન છે ને તે ફ્રેમ સેટ કરો તમારે બસ
તમે નહીં કરો માર્કેટ ખરાબ થશે હા એક જ મિનિટ ઓકે ગુડ ગુડ થેન્ક યુ ના એવું નથી સાહેબ અમેરિકામાં આવીને ઘણું બધું સહન કર્યું અમેરિકામાં આવ્યા પછી મેં ઘણું બધું સહન કર્યું તમારું બધું જામી જમાયેલું છે એ ચાલે છે છોકરા ઉપર આધાર
The roof from me over here.
અમારા કેમેરામાં એક જ હા એક જ છે બે છે પાકેટ એક નાનું છે
મારા સ્પીકર
સ્પીકર છે હરીભાઈ જોડે
છે ને
હા એ સ્પીકર સ્પીકર એટલે આપણે બે જોઈન ના કરતા એ
What was that?
I have here.
Okay.
Problem?
One second.
Okay, splitter is coming. Okay, no problem.
સચ જગ્યા જોઈ છે
પબ્લિક રहा
ના ના એ લોકો જવાનું દેવાનું
અચ્છા અચ્છા ઓકે એ તો બધા તો જવાના હતા
હા ત્યાંથી બધા બીજા કાંઈ નહીં પછી બધા વચ્ચે આવશે ચાલશે
એક્ઝેક્ટલી
કે અમારે લાઈવ સ્ટ્રીમ પર બધું ચેક
અચ્છા 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 કોઈ વાંધો નહીં હવે તમે જોઈ લો જરા હું અહીંયા ગોઠવું છું ઓકે નો પ્રોબ્લેમ
થેન્ક યુ
તારે તો આ લાઈવ સ્ટ્રીમિંગ કરે છે રાઈટ આમાં
યા
નીચે આવું લાઈવ સ્ટ્રીમિંગ મૂકી દે તો બહુ ઇઝી પડે લેપટોપ મૂકી દે મારું લેપટોપ લઈ જાય
તમે જાઓ અરે અહીંયાથી નહીં અહીંયાથી મને આવવા I am killer નહીં આવવા
Hello. Chair पर कैसों का आवाज ना आए, please keep quiet. Take your seat. Program is about to start. It will be starting in 5 minutes. So please be quiet. Take your seat and wait for the program to start. Thank you.
Jesse. Oh, sorry. I got it. No, tome tomar.
किलो ले मुझे रिकॉर्डिंग करूँ स्टार्ट तो भी अंदर मारा रिकॉर्डिंग चालू करूँ तो भी चालू જ રહેશે ને ઓલી સ્ક્રીન તો સ્ક્રીન ને બધું તો ચાલુ જ રહેશે રાઈટ લાઈવ સ્ટ્રીમિંગ તો ચાલુ જ રહેશે આમાં હું રેકોર્ડિંગનું બટન દબાવીશ તો
Yeah. Record the memory card.
હા રેકોર્ડિંગ
Hello, please be quiet. Please. Hello, please. Yes, please sit down. This is very good program. Do you know each and everything? Please be quiet. Yeah, right now actually within a couple of minutes we start our program. Yeah, Krishna ji actually he will tell you and please. Okay, 1 second.
Good afternoon. Jai Shri Krishna. So on behalf of Republican Hindu Coalition, NEAPI, and Shaili, I'd like to welcome all of you here today. We are going to be starting the program. I know we are a little delayed because a few of our guests were delayed, so we are starting now. They are on their way. They'll be walking in any minute. but we'll start just by seating a few people. But before that, it's going to be a very nice program today. It's a celebration, and as well, it's a very serious discussion about what should be done, the things that impact our day-to-day life, and how can we deal with those. So there's a lot of things that are coming up. We'll be hearing about that. We'll be talking about those, and these things will be carried over to the national media as well as all the way up to the administration, so some actions can be taken. We hope actions can be taken so that we can even do better. So without any further delay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask our panelists, we are going to have a panel discussion later, but I'm going to ask them to come and be seated on the stage. I'm going to call the names. So if you can please come and be seated, and then we will see our all the important guests that are coming in, and I'll call their names and I'll introduce them as well. So, Mr. Paresh Patel, please come and be seated on the stage. Mr. Gordon Patel, Mr. Ashok Patel, and all these are very accomplished people who have been working, providing jobs, doing a lot of things for our society, community, and everyone. Mr. Dev Chandra Dave, Mr. Bob Patel, Mr. Mukesh Vasani, Mr. Brit Sharma, and Mr. Raj Tiwari. So, as I said, we are going to be celebrating today as well. We are going to start with some celebrations and how good it can be. The world's oldest democracy and the world's largest democracy when they come together. We all know that elections in India just concluded. That was the largest turnout, the biggest show of democracy in the world, where we saw 600 million people, over 600 million people came out and voted. 600 million, imagine, double the size of the United States population. People came out, they voted, and they voted overwhelmingly and brought Mr. Prime Minister, Mr. Modi back to be the Prime Minister of India. So we'll celebrate his victory as well, we'll talk about it. We have a very strong line of panelists. We have a good, of course, Mr. Bannon. Everyone knows him. We'll hear about him and talk with him. We have generals from Army, retired and current generals. We have congressmen, and we have very dignified speakers. So we'll be talking about it. I'll give it to Hari Bhai. Hari Bhai.
This is very good event for us. Do you know our senior group? First time actually we are celebrating this kind of event. This is a pleasure for us, and really I am very thankful to Shali because he each and everything you can see our hall is just like a new looks. Everything is because of Shali, and really we celebrate. Do you know everyone? Krishna Bansal told us regarding Modi. Okay, do you know second term also is started from a big with margin 303 only for a BJP seat. Plus altogether alliance seat is I think more than 352. Yeah, this is a good thing, and we have both countries have very good relationship. We know very well. Both are democratic country. India is the largest democracy in the world, and right now both countries have a very good relationship, and this is good for us. And today actually we discussed regarding, do you know, we have just like a trade both country and China actually regarding here actually duty 25% or more. That's why actually we discussed that topic, and we'll discuss a lot of things in this event. Thank you very much. You can came and support us. Thank you very much.
And as we are waiting for our VIPs to come in, our speakers to come in, they can be walking in any minute, and we'll be welcoming them onto the stage. Yes, Hari Bhai said, and Hari Bhai, by the way, I mean, he's a big community leader. I mean, so a huge following. Does a lot of good things for the community, and I'd like to actually welcome. There are many of you who serve community in a big way. So welcome everyone. I see many people who have been very much involved and working with it. Yeah, we will be, I see few people coming in, so we'll be starting. Everyone, please be seated. Everyone, please be seated. Please be seated. Please be seated. We are going to be calling everyone by name. And we have 8 speakers. As I get a queue, I'll start calling them. I see a few of them. And I'll request in the meantime, anyone who's standing, please take a seat. Now with this, I see our all important guests coming in the background. I'm going to start and calling them and welcoming them. As I call the names, I'll please walk from the center of the aisle. Number first in the list, I'll call Mr. Frank Jeffrey. Let's give a big round of applause as he's walking out here. Followed by Mr. Vikram Kumar. Let's give a welcome. It's a traditional way to welcome, so this is the Indian tradition to welcome to the invited guests. Bhavna, please can you escort him to... Vikram. I'll call upon Mr. Brian Kennedy. Followed by Congressman Chris Stewart. And I'll call upon now Ms. Jayashri Patel, our own Jayashri Patel. Everyone knows Jayashri Bam, please. Followed by Lieutenant General Stephen Kwa. And now, finally, our own, the person who is behind all this. We need to call upon, who's that? Our own Shelly Kumar. Let's give a big round of applause. Shelly ji. Shelly ji. Let's call upon Shelly ji. Let's welcome Shelly ji with a big round. The person who keeps us all together, makes us marching. Welcome Shelly ji. Why not? He's a big supporter of Hindu tradition. Why not? Yeah, we need to. So as our guests are now getting seated, at this point, as a tradition, I'd like everyone to rise as we play the national anthem. First, we'll start with the US national anthem, followed by the Indian national anthem. So everyone, please rise. Please be seated. Now I'd like to call upon our main guests seated to, as we start any of our Hindu program, Indian program with lighting of lamp. So I'd like to invite you to please come over and light the lamp and kickstart the program. Please, everyone. Yeah, all Mr. Kennedy, Mr. Jeffrey, Mr. This is a auspicious way. This is the traditional way to kickstart any program. Can I request everyone to please be seated as we start the program now? And I promise I'm not going to make you come up and down multiple times now. Now my role was still up here to start the program, and I need to hand over the charge to our fearless leader, Shelly Kumar. He's the voice of our community. He carries the beacon, and we all follow him. He has done so much in so many years that it's unbelievable. I mean, he is the person. I don't see anyone who has done more than him in the Hindu American community in the history of United States. So can we have again a big round of applause for Shelly? We'll see a quick video of him. We'll see that how much he is talented, how he is. So can we have the video for Shelly Kumar ji played? And I'll request everyone to sit down there, please.
I've spoken of a shining city all my political life.
Born in 1948 to a middle-class Arya Samaji family, Shalabh grew up idolizing the freedom fighters. Inspired by his mother, herself a freedom fighter, and Arya Ratan, he learned the values of hard work and education, along with duty to family, community, and nation. He soon found his path in engineering and inventing. A gold medalist of Punjab, he earned his bachelor's in electronics engineering at the age of 20 and moved to US for further studies. Within 9 months, Shalabh received his master's from IIT Chicago, and 6 years later, he became CEO of AVG. In the early 70s, Mr. Kumar became a recognized inventor. He earned his first patent by creating a product and an industry called PLS, used for efficient automobile manufacturing. He also invented the famous McDonald's French fry computer. Having served on President Reagan's Business Advisory Council, Mr. Kumar was always combining innovation and success in business with social conscience by supporting numerous scholarships and charities.
Mr. Shalabh Kumar called me and was a significant contribution to the elevation of Ronald Reagan to the presidency.
Today's development is definitely a shot in the arm for the Gujarat Chief Minister.
I'm sure that an organization like the National Indian American Coalition, under the leadership of Mr. Kumar, can help us greatly in this process.
The Indian and Hindu community will have a true friend in the White House. We love the Hindus. We love India. My gratitude to Shelly.
I am proud to be a Hindu.
In keeping with Trump's promise to Hindus at the New Jersey rally,
I predict, and you have done a great job, that you will bring RHC to the United States. You have already done, despite some obstacles in the Congress, you're already way on your way, and we are so proud. The Hindu community is so proud.
So with this, is it not? Can we hear another round of applause? So this is what I call. He's a fighter, and then he went to he studied. He left his home, came here, became an inventor, multiple patents within his name. He's an inspiration. He's the torchbearer that, and he's the founder of RHC. He's the founder of NIAPI. And the person behind, we heard, Ab Ki Baar Trump Sarkar campaign that led to the Trump's victory in 2016. So let's, with big applause, with a standing ovation, let's welcome Shelly Kumarji to take over the charge. Can we have a standing ovation and big applause for Shelly Kumar? We love Shelly ji. Can we? Shelly ji, can we have the Shelly ji?
Thank you all. Thank you for coming to this event on a Saturday afternoon. I know Saturdays we get really busy in weddings. In fact, where Steve Bannon is staying at the West End, they were they saw Indian weddings, 300 people, so they were kind of surprised. Oh, that many people? So, but that's a low number. We know how many people come in little higher end weddings. So, it's a great, great honor to welcome Steve Bannon to my hometown. We have known each other for the last 6 years, 2013 beginning. Now, most of you remember the visit we made to Ahmedabad, the congressional delegation we took to end Chief Minister Modi's diplomatic isolation back in 2013, in March of 2013. One of the figures, one of the men behind that mission was none other than Steve Bannon. And even though it's called a right-wing newspaper or website, he carried a lot of articles on Modi. I coined the phrase, and then Steve Bannon continued with that. We called Modi the Ronald Reagan of India. So you could actually turn back, look back there, right next to my mother. That's my mother all the way back there. She's my inspiration. Next to her is Maharana Pratap. Maharana Pratap, that was named Maharana Reagan Community Center. So Maharana Pratap was one person who never ever gave up. He said, I will eat grass rather than submit to the Mongols. And such a big freedom of champion. And then, of course, on the other side, you have President Reagan, who freed up 1/3 of humanity without fighting a bullet. So when Modi came on the scene, we called him the Ronald Reagan, actually Rana Reagan of India. And right after he won, Steve conducted another interview congratulating Modi as a prime minister now. And then comes the 2016 campaign. Despite what you all hear in the media, the person who connected me to President Trump, and I sort of knew him from before, but really connected me to candidate Trump was none other than Steve Bannon. And he actually will tell you, because we have been conducting a lot of interviews, that whatever we asked for the Trump campaign, he was the CEO of the campaign, the number one guy running the campaign. So he did whatever I will ask for, he will agree to. Just 3 weeks prior to the election, October 15th, 2016, it has never happened in the history of presidential elections in the United States for all these years, over 200 years, that we have a candidate for president come to a Hindu American rally in New Jersey. And the credit all goes to Steve Bannon. The only request, because actually you don't sort of maybe know the whole background, and he'll tell you that. I'll leave it to him to tell you that. The only thing he could not agree to, I wanted candidate Trump, Donald Trump, to come in a Indian Hindu gown. So that's the only thing he wouldn't do. Other than that, he was all for it. And we worked together and made a huge big difference. He'll tell you that too. Just on this Modi's re-election on May 23, Steve was tied up in European parliamentary elections, so his schedule made it such that he had to be in Kazakhstan, of all places in Kazakhstan, on May 24th, where we want to broadcast an interview on Z News and Beyond on Modi's re-election victory, with this landslide victory. So I traveled to Kazakhstan to broadcast with him. So we together were interviewed by Sudhir Chaudhary, and so that's what the last episode with Modi. So I will ask now to run the Bannon video, so you get a little more introduction.
Steve Bannon, former CEO of Trump 2016 and former chief strategist of President Donald Trump, is a great patriotic American who deeply cares about the well-being of everyday Americans. Mr. Bannon is a scholar of Vedanta, loves Hindus, loves India, and is the biggest champion of a great relationship between U.S. and India under the leadership of President Trump and Prime Minister Modi.
Look, I think Modi is one of the most important leaders on the world stage, and I think that this landslide victory of his for a second term really puts him in a very special position, very special category. Through the good works of Shali, we've been able to follow Modi since really the very early days. In fact, Shali's the one that came to us and started talking about Modi as Ronald Reagan. I'm very proud of the fact that Breitbart News was the first news organization that really talked about Modi as the new Reagan. And this landslide victory was very analogous to Ronald Reagan's second term victory. That was the biggest landslide in American history.
He is well aware of the Chinese initiative of One Belt, One Road that threatens both India and U.S.
They're two radically different systems. You can see in One Belt, One Road, they've directly challenged India with One Belt, One Road. That is a direct challenge to India. They're trying to tie in the Eurasian landmass.
I'm told you are an avid reader of the Bhagavad Gita. You follow the Hindu philosophy. I'm very curious to know what got you so interested in Hindu mythology.
Yes, that's true. It's one of the most powerful books that I'm a Roman Catholic and a devout Catholic. I try to be as devout as I can. I'm a practicing Catholic. But one of the most powerful books as a young person I read was a book by a Frenchman called Man and His Becoming According to the Vedanta. And that got me very interested in Hindu spirituality and the study of Hindu religions. There was another book by a German professor called The Philosophy of India by a professor named, I believe his name was Zimmer, who wrote this book in the 1930s or 1940s. Had a very powerful impact on me. So I've studied to the degree that one can study. I've taken a lot of time over my life to study Hindu spirituality.
Such a loud voice that all 1.2 billion Hindus all over the world can hear that we have with Steve Bannon the best champion of Hindus. I'll request my friend and in many ways my guru to say a few words.
Thank you very much for having me today. It's a great honor. It's a great honor to be here. So, and I want to introduce very briefly, that will be introduced later, but today, to take away a weekend, shows you how important it is for us to have outreach to the Hindu American community and to come here and address you today. We have General Cast from the Air Force, Congressman Chris Stewart. We have Frank Gaffney, an old cold warrior from the Reagan administration. And we have Brian Kennedy from Claremont, formerly from Claremont, who's now head of the Committee on the Present Danger. Just very briefly, Modi, I found out about Modi and started studying him when I met Shali back in 2013. And he talked about this new politician who was really a nationalist and represented the nation of India and the Indian people. And at the time, we interviewed him at Breitbart, and they talked about him being the Reagan of India. But in 2014, when Modi won, was just about the time that Donald Trump started to go to the early stages of these what called cattle calls that start to the candidates start to go around and meet the activists. And it was in 2014 in New Hampshire that Donald Trump really started to make his impact on the activists in the Republican Party the exact same month that Modi was elected. And I could see that Trump had so much in common with Modi. They believed in the nation state. They believed in their citizens. And they believed that the way a democracy should work is not to kowtow to the globalists, but to focus on its citizens and its nation. And in that regard, Modi and Abe and Donald Trump are all very, very similar. Donald Trump, it was to reach out to Shali when I took over the campaign or stepped in as CEO. I think we were 12, 14, 16 points down. But one thing I knew we had to do was bring everybody together. We had to bring the Republican Party together. We had to bring traditional Republicans together. We had this populist base. We had evangelicals. We had conservative Catholics. We had the gun owners. But we had to bring everybody together because the odds were very much stacked against us. And we had very little time. What Shali recommended was that the Democratic Party had basically lost interest in the Hindu Americans, had taken that vote for granted, and that if somebody would actually start to address their concerns, particularly entrepreneurs and the workers that he thought that a great bulk of the Hindu Americans actually vote for Trump. People have to remember when we had this event, which was of all the big Trump rallies we had, was actually, if not the biggest, close to the biggest, but certainly the wildest, right? It was Bollywood come to the Trump campaign. So you took his rallies down in Bollywood. It was fantastic. But you have to remember when it happened. It happened in the middle of the Billy Bush situation, where most of the Republican establishment ran for the hills. And it was people that really supported Trump that hung in there. And Shali, they had the event, everybody showed up, and it was great. And if you know Shali, you know, I did get bait and switch a little bit at the end when he wanted President Trump to put on traditional Indian garb. I said, hey, I think it's going to have to be the red tie and the white shirt and the blue thing. So, but the turnout was tremendous, and we wouldn't be here today, right? And President Trump wouldn't be president if groups like Shali's had not pulled together in the 88 days against Hillary Clinton in the machine of the Democratic Party. We're here today, and this is the reason that we're here. Shali approached me, Frank Gaffney and Brian Kennedy, General Cass, Congressman Stewart, others that are very concerned about America's place in the world. Frank and Brian Kennedy restarted this group, which you'll hear more about today, the Committee on the Present Danger. And it was during the Cold War when we had kind of lost our focus. The elites had lost their focus on the Soviet Union. And we were able to kind of be the backbone of the Reagan administration. And Reagan really wanted to see the destruction of the evil empire. And as Shali said, it's freed over 1 billion people in Eastern Europe and other parts of the United States. And honestly, I think even in India, give a new breath of fresh air of what freedom could actually be for India when the Soviet Union collapsed. The same thing has happened over the last 20 or 25 years regarding China. It's not about the Chinese people. These are decent and hardworking people you're ever going to see. But this is about this radical cadre of the Chinese Communist Party. And so what we've done is Frank and Brian, we've gone throughout the country to Wall Street and to Washington, D.C., and given kind of seminars or had conferences. And Shali came to me and said, hey, I would like to talk to the American people about manufacturing. And Shali had a presentation at the Breitbart Embassy, and then he gave one at Capitol Hill as part of the committee and really woke people up about what's really going on in American manufacturing. What I'm proudest of today is that we're here, and the title of the presentation about unrestricted warfare is about the demise of American manufacturing. And we're doing it with a group of Hindu American entrepreneurs who really built one of the great industries in this country, PCB board manufacturing and assembly. And you guys came over here you went to engineering school. We didn't have anybody give you capital, nobody give you a break. You did it with your own entrepreneurship, your own grit, your own determination. And the question gets to be, how did this industry just kind of disappear? How did it become from $70 billion where it is today? It's the same policies of Wall Street and the elites in our country. And that's what we're here today to talk about. But what I'm proudest about, you have Hindu American entrepreneurs that came here and helped build this industry. And the name of the presentation is American Manufacturing, right? It shows you the greatness of the assimilation process and what the Hindu Americans have added to this country. So with that, we're going to have a full presentation. I'll talk to you a little bit later.
I would like to request Chairman Brian Kennedy to come and make some remarks. Chairman Kennedy.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, everyone, for coming on a Saturday and being here. It's an honor to be here with so many Americans who worry about their country and are concerned about their future. It's an honor to be with you, Shelley, and with the people who really care about this country, like Steve and Frank Gaffney and others who helped me organize this. It's a sign, really, that our country is in trouble, that on a Saturday, hardworking people have to come together and talk about the threat to the country that China presents. At various times in our history, there has been something called the Committee on the Present Danger, which Steve mentioned. Does that help? This Committee on the Present Danger was started in the 1950s to help explain President Truman's national security policy. And in the 70s, it was brought together a group of national security intellectuals, public policy scholars, and concerned patriots to try to understand what the Soviet threat was and to explain to the American people what would need to be done if we were going to meet the Soviet threat. Ronald Reagan was a member of the Committee on the Present Danger, and he and 39 of his colleagues from the committee went into the Reagan administration and together made policy, rebuilt the American military, and brought down the Soviet Union. That was a great achievement. As we look out today on what this government's doing, thank God President Trump was elected with the fine work of Steve Bannon and Shali and others. But President Reagan is all alone in trying to understand what the threat from communist China is to America. Today, the Chinese Communist Party is able to control 1.4 billion people and to use it to wage economic and information war against the United States. They steal our intellectual property, they have forced technology transfers, and they are doing everything in their power to make sure they are the preeminent power on earth. We think on the Committee on the Present Danger China that this is not adequately understood by our country. That American policymakers get large donations from business people who do business in China. And so American business and political elites get corrupted by their interaction with the Chinese. And that's unfortunate, because over the last 3 decades, we've made communist China very rich, and we've done it at the expense of the American people. The purpose of this committee is really to explain to our countrymen those existential threats that the communist Chinese present, and to change the policies to help Donald Trump, to help the Congress understand what will be required to make sure that America remains the preeminent economic and military power on earth. Because if one thing is for certain, it is that the United States remains the defender of individual liberty and human freedom on earth. We have a good friend in India. India is a democracy that is prosperous and becoming ever more so. It is intolerable, to be clear, from the point of view of the communist Chinese, that remains so. They have no strategic interest in either India being free or prosperous. And so that the interests of the United States and the interests of India are very much the same. And that is to make sure that the free world is defended, that we are capable of deterring the communist Chinese from believing that they can somehow harm the United States or India. And it's our purpose here today in this meeting to try to explain to you what we have been studying, to get your help, because we need you adding your voices to ours to make sure that our countrymen understand the gravity of the situation. With that, let me thank again Shali for having us here today. And I look forward to being with you.
Speaker Newt Gingrich, your honorary chairman of RHC, he very much wanted to be here, but schedule did not allow, and was a very short notice in a way. But he has sent a message that I would like to have you listen to.
I want to thank my good friend Shelley Kumar for giving me this opportunity and inviting me to talk with you. But I also want to thank each of you for being involved as citizens. It's very, very important that we hear your voices. The fact is that we're in a tremendous competition with China, that the Chinese in many different ways cheat in how they approach this, that their totalitarian dictatorship doesn't play by the rules. And the result is that they undercut and destroy a lot of American jobs. And many of you represent companies that have lost jobs because the Chinese refuse to have fair competition. So your voices are particularly important because you understand the complexity of dealing with the Chinese government and the Communist Party that runs that government. You understand the importance of being hard-nosed, practical business people. You understand that if some foreign government decides to undercut you and to cut costs down to 1/3 of the real cost, nobody can survive that. Nobody can stay in business. So I think this is a very important meeting. I want to encourage you after this meeting to contact your members of the House and your members of the Senate. Let them know about your concerns. Let them know of your support. I also want to encourage you, reach out both on talk radio, on websites, in letters to the editor, and let the community know that you are smart business people. You are committed to honest, effective competition. But that means we have to insist that the Chinese Communist dictatorship play by the rules and not be allowed to cheat. And again, I want to thank all of you for taking time as citizens to be involved in this very important project.
Let's give a big round of applause to our honorary chairman, Speaker Newt Gingrich. And now, actually, I have another very good news for you. And just get ready to listen to that. And yesterday, actually, I approached the legendary Steve Bannon to accept to be honorary chair of Republican Hindu Coalition, and it took him only 2 seconds to accept it. Let's give him a big round of applause. Let's all give up. So welcome to the new honorary chair of Republican Hindu Coalition. Next thing, what you're going to see is, I was sort of part of it, but really did not, you all know, or most of you know, that at one time we were in printed circuit boards and printed circuit board assembly business, and we didn't really talk a whole lot about it because we moved on to our technology businesses, other businesses, not just technology businesses, with the IP and software and firmware and hardware, HMIs and PLCs and industrial automation and so forth. So, but as Mr. Bannon and Frank invited me to take part in these Committee on Present Danger China, and I went to a couple of them, and I started thinking about manufacturing. That's actually one of my core expertise, and so I told that to Steve, where my history has been and what has happened to the circuit board industry. So he invited me to give a presentation to the committee, and I did, and it has taken off on from there, and just didn't even think about it. Maybe that's in a ways people call Hindus as pacifists. So we were pacifists in there and didn't really take an action then. By the way, Steve, I do have some news on that too. Some people did try to take an action in 2004. We could talk about that a little bit later. But this was a very, very large industry. Lots of people were ex-employees of ABG who started forming these businesses, lots of businesses. And what you will hear, this is the video which we are premiering here, that actually what happened and the leadership of both parties, whether it's Democrat or Republican, irrespective. From 2000 to 2007, America lost 3.54 million jobs, manufacturing jobs, and in our particular industry, just here in Chicago area, Elk Grove Village Center, we lost, as you will hear from the people who were involved there at that time, over 50,000 jobs, and nobody did anything about it. People, it was a premeditated, you'll see that video, it was a premeditated murder of American businesses and American jobs. And actually that attack was on, first attack, very precise attack, they're very smart people, was on the printed circuit boards and on printed circuit board assembly. So we are premiering that video. So let's go ahead and play that.
This is Vandana Chingal, media director at RHC, standing right inside of 2400 Lord Avenue, Elk Grove Village. 20 years ago, this place was a home for circuit systems. It was employing 800 people. Now, this is a company, it's a warehouse, distribution center of Mitsui, which has less than 50 people.
Same thing here with us. As a matter of fact, this area around Chicago, we had almost 150 circuit board shops and 100 assembly shops, like we're in business today. At our peak, we get almost 300 employees, and in this general area, probably over 1,000 employees that are now in the shadow of what they were once. Around 2000, premeditated management teams in our support industry. Well, you know, probably the same thing that we have industry and to similar industries in this area. Probably 50,000 people that have lost their jobs over a period of time, all due to Chinese products.
We are in the circuit system plant, we are the Joe.
When we came under pricing pressure from China and their invasion, we ultimately ended up becoming traders and started importing products from China. We were importing almost $12 million of airframe circuit boards and $8 million of electronic assembly. But over time, we came under more pricing pressure, and so we finally had to exit that business and lay off most of our employees. Mr. President, if we had sustained tariffs, we'd be able to build back our business to where it was before and bring back tens of thousands of jobs to America.
We are here with the Sophia Board Assembly Plant in Elk Grove Village. He is Mr. Bob Patel. He's the owner of Surya Electronics.
In China, the government subsidy and the labor rate is low. So if we have a sustained tariff, we can complete it. It's a process. We are on the right track by imposing the tariff on China, but you have to sustain it for a long time. If you have sustained the tariff for a long term, then company like ours, electronics and others, can invest money into the business and bring thousands of jobs back.
Let's hear from you. I've been filming many people since morning on the subject of like how China invaded this industry. And I heard that you were also in the same industry. I am in a building which is owned by you, RHC, and this has been abundant. So let's hear from your story, from your angle.
Thank you, Vandana. Yes, part of our business was in printed circuit boards and printed circuit board assembly. In fact, we were the third largest manufacturer of printed circuit boards in the United States. And also in printed circuit board assembly, we were among the top 20 about 20 years ago, and employed thousands and thousands of people. We had plants all over the country. There were plants, one of the plants which you're standing here, that is one of the plants. This entire building is about 60,000 square foot building. Did not have any business afterwards, after the Chinese invasion. There were about 15 people in this room. That's called the yellow room. So we were fortunate enough to have other businesses in electronics that were not affected because of our intellectual property, our own firmware and software and hardware, of course, specialty niche markets. And
I can just say that when I was walking in this portion of the building, I could see that at a given time, so many lives were getting their livelihood from here. More than 600 people working in this house.
That's right. There were about 600 people, and more than 600 people that were employed in this 60,000 square foot building. And once again, today it's been donated to the community, the Hindu American, Indian American community in the western suburbs, northwestern suburbs, suburbs of Chicago, and they use this building for social activities. The good question that we lost 4 million manufacturing jobs from 2000 to 2007. Ivy League economists and New York Times argued that we did not move one job to China. It's all because of automation. You should ask the owners of those 5,000 companies just in our segment of the industry that closed during this period. And now that upjohn economist Susan Hausman has debunked your theory, so get off of it. Some in corporate America want a quick trade deal. I have one question for them. How does a trade deal with China bring American manufacturing back? In the spirit of Maharana Pratap and Ronald Reagan and all those champions of freedom, we have to act, and we have to act now. Mr. President, you know it instinctively. Just like aluminum and steel, if you want the electronics manufacturing industry to be revived and create millions of jobs, we need sustained tariffs. So Frank, how is it? So at this point, I will ask Vikram Aditya Kumar, my son, who is now the CEO and chairman of AVG group of companies, to come in and give his perspective on tariffs. Many times, a lot of people, maybe I have an idea that we should take what he's going to say and put it in the face of Ivy League economists and New York Times. I think that's what we ought to do. So, but for here, this purpose, I asked Vikram to actually bring in some products and to show, and not that if we did more automation, we are very highly automated. That if we did more automation, that we could bring it back. All the other that electronic PC board industry. So, Vikram, here you go.
Thank you. Can we grab the presentation, please? Full screen, please. All right, thank you. So I'm here to talk a little bit about today for a couple minutes on the clear and present danger of what China is doing to us. As an American manufacturer, many of you sitting in here in this room have small to mid-sized businesses, employing several hundred, several thousand employees throughout this room. And we were impacted over the years, many years, losing hundreds of thousands of jobs in the United States. In Chicagoland area alone, like we said, over 50,000 jobs lost because of this danger and this threat and this continuing threat that China brings to U.S. manufacturing. Next slide, please. So there's a lot of electronic products exported to the United States from China. Telephones, laptops, computers, HMIs, PLCs, LED products, transformers, printed circuit boards, many different type of products. Over $300 billion worth of electronic products that are exported from China into the United States, that if we have sustained tariffs and consistent tariffs and the right tariff codes for the right products, we can bring back hundreds of thousands of jobs back here in the United States. Next slide, please. So the president has made a good initiative initially with the implementation of tariffs. But it needs improvement. He needs to hear our voices, and that's why we're here collectively talking today about what products, from manufacturers like ourselves, what products need to be tariffed. Not just the components, not just the bare printed circuit boards, but the whole assembly of various electronic products. As one of the only manufacturing outfits left, ABG Group, in the United States in our space for HMIs and PLCs and various automation control products, the Chinese tariffs currently, as they exist, actually are negatively impacting us. We're one of the major suppliers of these products, competing against giant organizations such as Rockwell and Siemens and many different other organizations out there. And they all have moved their manufacturing out to China. We have made a commitment, and my father made a commitment many years ago, that we will not move anything to China. We will maintain, we are very proud of being an American manufacturer. So I wanted to show a couple of the products just to give an idea of, for those who are not as tech savvy, and just an overall view of what products and how we can bring back, and if you can't see that slide up there, but over 300,000 jobs just by having sustained tariffs and the tariffs on the right products. So let me show you.
You focus on, you're going to actually show the product. Zero in on the product, so you can see the products.
So first off,
product.
This is called a human-machine interface, an HMI. All these type of products, this particular product is a specialized purpose computer that essentially controls and automates all manufacturing outfits in the United States, whether it be automotive like Ford, General Motors, packaging industries, pharmaceutical industry, all small, mid-sized, and large businesses out there on all their machines utilize an HMI and a PLC, which is a programmable logic controller, to automate and to build cars, to build items, to manufacture in the United States. That's the final product itself, the final assembly. What inside it, and I have the bare boards inside, you have the motherboard. The motherboard of the HMI and all these electronic products inside laptops, inside HMIs, inside all industrial electronics, inside various type of electronic manufacturing equipment. These motherboards, we manufacture these motherboards in the United States. We do the final assembly of the final product in the United States. What has been tariffed so far are the base printed circuit boards, which a lot of you in this room today are PCB company owners. We have been tariffed on these base boards. Raw components that go within the board, little resistors, little parts like this, penny parts, dollar parts, those also have been tariffed out there. Now, what happens is when manufacturers like ABG, like other ones like yourself out here, are being tariffed on these small components even, and these bare printed circuit boards, in fact, it makes it even more difficult for us to compete against China. All our bill of material costs have gone up by 25%. So when we're competing against China as itself, we're getting hurt by the current infrastructure and current setup of how the administration has put the tariffs on. But we're not saying, hey, stop tariffing these. We're saying tariff everything. If you're going to tariff everything. Make it difficult to bring back the, to make it so that China cannot manufacture these products. Bring back the 300,000 jobs. Tariff the penny components. Tariff the printed circuit boards. Tariff the final assembly, which is actually the high-skilled, high-paying manufacturing jobs out there. That's what's important for the administration to understand, because that will bring back, literally, 296,000 jobs has been our study back in the United States, just in our field itself. So we asked the president to focus on sustained tariffs and go from a tier level, not only the base components, but from the top level manufacturing to the component level, and make it so that we can bring manufacturing back and make America great again.
Actually, I'll take a moment to go a little bit deeper into that as well. A lot of technologists and people who work in the PC board industry and PC board assembly industry, they will understand it, but a lot of people who are not into the field, they are in finance and other businesses, they may not really totally get it. So I want you to zoom in on this. Okay? Now, that's an HMI. So that is the part, it's a finished good that gets installed on the machines. That is the first item that should be tariffed. But the mistake we have made, and I just wonder as to how that happens, is it the lobbyists or is it just lack of knowledge that the people who should be on the negotiating room should be manufacturing experts? The first item that should be tariffed in electronics are the finished goods, like this. Okay? Now that is not tariffed. Intentions were good. That is not tariffed. And what is tariffed are components. So, components here, that's what's tariff. So that cost, in order to try to bring the manufacturing back, is in a way, by mistake, I would say, Steve, I don't know what you would want to say that, but by mistake is done wrong. They have left the tariffs, no tariffs, on the final product. No tariffs. And how are you going to bring the manufacturing, particularly high-level manufacturing, back if you leave the finished goods without a tariff? So what we say is we should tariff everything that comes from China. China is a huge big threat. So I'm kind of going over a little part of my presentation, which was going to come in later. But there was an interesting story. Since these products are mostly, except for AVG that does that right here, because we just will not give in. So, even your Rockwells and Siemens and Mitsubishi, of course, they all get this thing done in China. And so just about 2 months or 3 months ago, there was a news what the Chinese did. They inserted a little code in a chip. It's supposed to be audited, but they could not detect that this spy chip. So the product comes here with a spy chip and sending all kinds of information, collecting all kinds of data. Let's just assume this board is in a computer in a Department of Commerce establishment. What do you think is happening? So that's got to be stopped. Next, I take the opportunity to welcome Lieutenant General Quast to come in and give some remarks. Good to see a man in a uniform. I always love to see people in uniform.
Well, I thank you for allowing me to be a part of this. Thank you for the invitation. I have been asked to come and share with you the perspective of national security with regard to this conversation. And I don't come to you just as a man in uniform, because all of our defenders share this same project of being great peacemakers by being so protected that we never have to have any violence as part of our future. That is first and foremost the important point to take away, is that if we do this right, there's peace and prosperity for all of humanity and all of those that share this value, that every human being is created with equal value and respect. And if we build on that common platform, great things can happen. But the Air Force think tank, which is what I'm here to represent, has been studying this for many years because we study competition. And this story is as old as time. And I don't just come to you as an American that understands what it means to be vulnerable, which is what you are all experiencing. You are experiencing the vulnerability of your work and your companies being dealt with by predatory competition that lies, cheats, and steals to get an advantage. And I understand that more personally than you might think, because I did not grow up in America. I grew up in a small tribe in Cameroon, West Africa, up near where Boko Haram operates, and I got to live a life as a child of insecurity, where if you do not have power, you must submit to the values of others. And this story that we're talking about, historically, has happened forever. Since the beginning of mankind, great civilizations have competed with one another, and it is an infinite competition. It will never end. And we will be competing 1,000 years from now. It may be a slightly different conversation, and maybe there will be some different people in the room in 1,000 years, although some of these beautiful young ladies will still be here because they will live forever. But I will tell you that what is happening here is that China is attacking us with a strategy that we do not recognize. And the strategy is much bigger than just the electronics manufacturing element of our societies. It is a strategy to undercut the industrial base and the economy of their competition, and to tap into the global markets to make their profits better. Because all national security is economic. It is not about the weapons, it is about the economy. And my job is to protect the economy, the government, and the citizens and sovereign soil. And in a world where we are so interconnected, we must act together. As was already said, India and America, we are both responsible democracies. We have no territorial ambitions. We are aligned in our industrial bases to uplift the human condition. But China, across every industry, whether it is solar panels, or electronics, or turbines for wind power, or space, they have designed a strategy to insidiously undercut the industrial base. And they are stealing away the power of our civilizations. Now, in every great competition like this, there is a role that the government must play. Because private entrepreneur capitalism cannot solve some of these problems when you have a communist government that controls all of their companies and can funnel money and strategy and vision that can beat any one small company. And this is what has happened in America in the past. There's historical examples for this. This is not the only time in our history that we have been able to do something to solve the problem we're facing today. Teddy Roosevelt did this when he moved from a wooden ship navy with sails to an iron navy with steam and coal. FDR, our great president during World War II, did this, building the aerospace industry. We have a strong Navy because we have a strong industrial base of the merchant marine and the shipbuilding industry. We have a strong Air Force because we have a strong industrial base of an aerospace industry. And in the digital age we're moving into, in this 21st century, where information and energy are the golden pots of economic growth and development, we must have a government that is willing to help us in all of these ways to defend the companies that make the free market entrepreneurial spirit of innovation and invention the dominant economic journey to bless our families and our civilizations with meaningful work, protecting that work from predators that will steal, lie, and cheat to get an advantage, and to help us build a global economy where we all can tap into the blessings because we have security. And that is my message to you, and I am here to help by building power that defends these values, that every human being is created equal, with equal value and respect and dignity, and that we must partner as nations that share these values, or China, with 1.4 billion people, may have a competitive advantage. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Okay, next we have a Skype call. That is the person who will be addressing us here is Kyle Bass, and he let's get him on then. I'll speak.
Hi there. Hi there. Okay.
There we are.
Okay, I'll answer. Okay.
Okay. We're gonna turn on the lights.
હવે આનું ક્યાં ક્યાં છે
આઈડી આ શું
યા ઓકે મને એમ 50 પર આપો ઓકે હા દેવ ઋષિભાઈ give me 1 second just a wait હું એડજસ્ટ કરું અને આમાં ભરાયું તારી પાસે બધું છે બરોબર તારી પાસે મેમરીઝ ને બધું છે ઓકે
I see your screen now.
તું રાખજે પેલા તારી ફ્લેશ ઓકે મને આપેલો હું નીકળું છું પણ ત્યાંથી આપશો
પેલું ચાર્જ મારું બીજું તમને દેખાશે
તને સમજાવે છે તું આ બાજુ અમને તારે ક્યાંક સુધી કરવાનું છે યા ગો ઓન ધ સાઇડ
ત્યાંથી લઈ લો ને આપણે
યા જો ઓકે દેવ આ પેલું દેવ આ બેટરી અને હવે એને સમજાવી દેવી કે શું કરવાનું છે ઓકે હવે અને મને મારી બેટરી આપી દેવ give it to me. બરાબર અને વ્યવસ્થિત બધું પિક્ચર્સ અને બધું લે છે બોલજો યુ હેવ ડન યા પ્લીઝ અને એનું પેલું એ ચાર્જ
Maybe I can just I can see you guys perfectly. What am I just
દેવ બધા સ્પીકર્સ બધા પિક્ચર્સ લે છે એ પાસે 7200 નથી વાંધો નહીં આમાં લે છે
Kyle, if you can hear us,
હું નીકળું છું
just ask you to go ahead and speak. We can't
કેટલા
really
નીકળવાનું
capture the image.
શું
Okay,
તમે
Kyle,
વાગે નીકળો
can you speak, please? I guess you are talking, but we're not hearing. Huh?
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, yes. So we'll just do an audio presentation. Okay? Oh, you can see? Okay, good. All right. Okay, very good. Thank you. That's Kyle. And
Yes, how are you?
good, good. Thank you. Thank you for doing this and presenting it to you. See the audience here. Wait, do you see the whole room? No. Oh, okay. Yeah, there's.
I can see Mr. Khan, I believe.
Okay, no, this is all. I don't know whether we can show you that or not. This is a room full of. This goes all the way back. Almost 1,000 people here. So go ahead. Kyle is expert in finance.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Frank. I'm used to well, but I'm happy to get started if you like. Yeah.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. Well, number one, I apologize for not being there today. We are, my wife and I are very close to having a baby, or else I would be there in Chicago with you. With Frank, can you hear me? Okay. Okay. So, in the guise of video of the peasant danger of China, and as we talk about unrestricted warfare from the perspective of 4 different buckets
We have the buckets of kinetic war, we have the bucket of cyber war, economic war, and information war. And today, we're going to talk about how we know China has engaged in 3 of the 4 wars against the West for the last couple of decades. But today's meeting is actually at a very important time in the timeline of China's aggression towards the West, because as we sit here today, I'm going to talk about something that both threatens the U.S., India, as well as China. And we're gonna talk primarily about China's economy is at a very difficult point in economic life due to the last 10 years of reckless credit growth. And most importantly, as President Trump enters the talks with the G20 in Osaka this next week, we have a policy prescription for him that we'd like to discuss. And it focuses on the other side of the coin, which is, as you know, as the U.S. went to impose tariffs on China, China's immediately retaliatory response was to impose very severe and strict tariffs on U.S. agriculture products. So they imposed 62% tariffs on U.S. pork exports. They imposed 27% tariffs on U.S. soybeans, and they banned all poultry sales from the U.S. to China. And that has been China's primary retaliatory weapon for President Trump's tariffs. And what we're here to talk about today is something that I don't know if many of you have paid a lot of attention to, but I suggest that the world start paying attention to the African swine fever that is now running rampant through all of the provinces of China. And when you look at what's happening just in the last 2 or 3 months, we think that 40% of the entire swine population of China has been eradicated, has actually had to be culled. And after talking with experts in the UK and in the US, as far as people that are experts on this disease, the African swine fever is a particularly virulent disease that kills upwards of 100% of the pigs that get infected with it. And if you think about the way that China is set up, China has 440 million head of pigs in its country. And to put that into perspective, the next largest is Europe at 150 million and the US at 72 million. So we believe that upwards of 40% of the Chinese pig population has already been killed this year. And we think it's likely that 80 to 100% of their pig population will be killed in 2019. That has enormous ramifications, not only for the food security and food supply of China, but for that of the rest of the world. China today has 55% of the world's pork population or pig population. They have 20. Pork, beef, and poultry for the next few years. And why that's functionally important to the US and to India for that matter as we head into the G20. What we're trying to explain to President Trump is that China's primary retaliatory tool for tariffs actually has an expiration date. So today what you see is cold storage in China seems to be full. And if you look around the world and the world press, they're telling you that they have an abundance or a superabundance of pork. And what's important to understand is that they have to kill their entire population of pigs in the next 60 to 90 days, their cold storage is going to be full. But the South population has already been, in the top provinces in China, our on-the-ground research tells us the sows, 80 to 90% of the sows have already been killed. So you're going to see in 90 to 120 days from now, a severe pork shortage in China. So as we go into the G20, and as Trump is forced to re-engage with the China for the week or so, that's in its strongest position that it's ever been, both from an economic perspective
and from a retaliatory strike perspective as we negotiate with China. So I don't think we can have 8 minutes on this speech. I think it's going to be important for everyone to pay a lot of attention to the pork population, the pork availability in China, and what's likely to happen going forward from a food security perspective. So Frank, I'll leave it there, and I don't know if you take questions, or thank you very much for taking the time to listen. And I apologize for not being there in person today.
Thank you. Thank you, Kyle. I don't know whether you can hear me. Okay, Frank, it's your turn.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I look forward to meeting someday.
Thank you. Let me say a word about Kyle Bass. He is a hedge fund manager based in Dallas, Texas, who has spent an entire lifetime working in Asia and related spaces and is extremely knowledgeable. The warning he's just made about this Asian swine flu is very real, and watch this space. Again, my name is Frank Gaffney. I'm the president of an organization called the Center for Security Policy. I'm very proud to be with this team, the vice chairman of the Committee on the Present Danger of China. We're here to discuss, of course, that present danger posed by China to India and the world, as well as to our own country. A microcosm of that present danger, as you've been hearing, and as many of you know better, frankly, than me, comes from what China has deliberately done to destroy America's manufacturing base. But that's just one example of the threat that China poses and the way it is acting on that threat to this country. It's affecting, of course, our trade balance. It's affecting, of course, our economic security. And as this great General Stephen Quast has just pointed out, it is affecting our national security as well. President Trump will be meeting next week. Kyle mentioned the G20 meeting in Singapore with Xi Jinping, the communist dictator of China. And he will be under intense pressure to cut a deal with the Chinese Communist Party. A deal that will affect one part of this problem. Maybe it will address the trade imbalance. Maybe it will address the theft of our intellectual property, including that of people in this room. Maybe it will address the manipulation of the Chinese currency. Or maybe it won't. And based on a lot of experience with these guys, you can take it to the bank, it won't. Why is that? Because they don't honor their commitments. They benefit from the appearance of a deal and then abrogate it. And our issue with the Committee on the Present Danger is that even if this was the perfect deal on trade and on intellectual property and on currency, it would still be hopelessly inadequate. And before Shelley gets my cane, let me just say, we have to address the various other ways in which China is threatening us. Oh, you are? You're agreeing with me, not taking me away. Okay. Let me just tell you a couple of other examples, because you need to understand this when you are about to hear the demand, not just the encouragement, the demand that the president must abandon tariffs. I mean, you're asking for sustained tariffs. These are people who want to tear them up altogether right now for nothing. But here's some other thoughts. We have to address, in addition to the trade stuff, China's destruction of our manufacturing base, for starters, but also China's military buildup, which is a direct threat to us, to India, to the nations around the world, in part thanks to what Shelley has done some very important leading work on, the Belt and Road Initiative, which is a new colonial enterprise designed to build out the infrastructure, both physical and digital, by which China will rule the world. Encircling India, and, by the way, penetrating and subverting lots of other places in which we have vital interests here in the United States, like Europe, like Central Asia, like Africa, like our own hemisphere. We have to address those problems, as well as one that General Quast is very expert on, and he touched on it briefly, China's bid to dominate space, which will enable it to dominate the world economy as well as the world's security in the future if we allow them to do that. These are the sorts of things that need to be fixed, ladies and gentlemen, not just trade. And Newt Gingrich talked with you a short while ago about what you need to do. You need, because our nation, as well as India, demands that all of us become involved in counteracting the pressure that President Trump is under just to cut a damn deal. And so what Newt said, to recap, was please get in touch with your elected representatives. You have a splendid example of the best of them in this room. You'll be hearing from him momentarily, Congressman Chris Stewart. You have people who represent you in Washington, as well as here in Illinois, who need to hear from you about your concerns in this regard, as does most especially President Trump. And Newt said you can use social media, you can use talk radio, you can use op-ed articles, and you can use letters to the editor, you can get in touch with your various other friends and comrades and your leader here, Shelley. Help empower him to be your voice in speaking to those in power about why we can't settle for a false deal, or even if it's not a false deal, a false or actual deal that only focuses on one set of promises. So, in conclusion, I'm appealing to you as a native-born American, because I know many of you are not. I'm appealing to you to help this country that you have adopted as your own, because you bring to this, frankly, something that altogether too many of us who had the privilege of being born here don't have, which is an appreciation of how precious, how vitally important, how magnificent this country is, and the freedoms it guarantees its people, including the freedom to succeed. So please, come to our aid now to help us defeat the present danger, China. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Congressman Chris Stewart. Congressman, would you come to my side, please? He's a three-term or four-term congressman from state of Utah. And actually, I did study your district as far as the Hindu Americans are concerned, so I had an exact count. So Indian Americans totally, total population is about 3,000, 2941. And 42, okay. All right. And then you have a number of Hindu American voters. But he sent a message, but he actually appears in person, which was quite touching to me as a Hindu, because you see, it was until only 3 years ago, until We got the help from Steve Bannon and President Trump. The Hindu name itself, the Hindu word was not popular. So, everybody would want to say Indian, they don't want to say Hindus, because we're just too polite. So, and we are 1.2 billion of us Hindus, and we should be very proud to be a Hindu. So, here he sent a message, but then he appeared in person, where he felt a lot of commonality with Hindus. He has a great appreciation for Hinduism. So he will say a few words, but let's, first of all, just for this, let's give him a big, big round of applause. Let's also show how Hindus think of President Trump and Steve Bannon. So here is Congressman Chris Stewart, and I'm going to ask him something, a total surprise to him, but like Steve Bannon, it took him only 2 seconds to agree to be honoring, to be the honorary chairman of Republican Hindu Coalition. So I want to tell Congressman here a little something, and maybe it'll take him only a second. So we have a congressional Hindu caucus, an official body. Yes! Yes! Okay, here we have Congressman Chris Stewart. Thank you.
All right, Steve, did I beat you? You did 2 seconds. I did less than that. And Shali, if I come back, will you have them hold up signs and say we love Congressman Chris Stewart?
You're just starting.
So I'm going to take a moment. As I was flying out this morning, I wrote a bunch of notes on 5 pieces of paper here. It's going to be way more than you guys want to hear about, but I do want to mention a couple things. First, as I look out over this audience, what a beautiful sight. Those of you wonderful women in the saris, that's a wonderful, beautiful, colorful thing. The men, you all look like me. We got to step up. We got to look better than this, don't we? And as I look out, I've been looking at this, the sign at the back there, the National Indian American. That is a beautiful thing. Because you are proud to be Hindu, you are proud of your Indian heritage, just like I'm proud to be Mormon, to be LDS from Salt Lake City. But we are all Americans. That's the thing that we love. And it turns out that we want to protect that, which is also why we're here today. And there's a threat, and there's emerging threats, and there's real threats, and there's some pretend threats that people talk about, but there's nothing more important than this thing we have here today with the growing threat of China. My perspective on this would be slightly different than many of the distinguished people sitting behind me. That is, I come out as a conversation from Washington, D.C. It's part. Is that a lot better? Yeah. All right, I'm going to start all over again. Okay, a slightly different perspective. I actually had a meeting this morning. I want to say I was with this week, a very senior minister from China. Again, I don't want to identify her because it's a private conversation, but you know what? She was angry. She was angry at President Trump. She was angry at me, by extension, many of the Republicans, and those of us who are willing to say, you have lied and cheated and stealed from us for a long time. And we shouldn't be doing it anymore. Some of our policies have been fairly naive, and I didn't say that to her, of course. But she wanted me to approach the president and try to change his mind on some things. I just couldn't do that from a military perspective. You don't know anything about me. I'm a former Air Force pilot. I proudly wear these leans. My new friend Steve behind me, the general behind me.
He's just being modest. Not only that, he holds a record of the fastest around the globe in an Air Force plane. Is correct?
Fastest non-stop flight around the world. Yep. I actually hold 3 world records, but that's one of them. But I promise you, my time flying was a lot more fun than being in Congress. I used to be up flying. I go, I can't believe they pay me to do this, and I have never felt that way since I've been elected. But from a military perspective, and recognizing that China isn't an emerging threat, they are a present-day threat. In many ways, they are our peer. We have this perception that they're near peers or something less than that. It's not true anymore. And when you consider the aggression that they've been willing to show, whether it's from the South China Sea, or as Mr. Gaffney said, the Belt Road Initiative, go to Djibouti in North Africa and see what their intentions are there. Go to many places in Asia, as I've had the opportunity to do more recently, South America as well. And so whether it's you're talking strategically or diplomatically or militarily or from an intelligence perspective, I sit on the House Intelligence Committee as well. 2 things I want to mention that haven't been mentioned today, and I think they're worth at least highlighting. One of them is the repressive nature of this government and their incredible sophistication in controlling their own people. Something like 3 million Uyghurs in the western portion of the country who we know are in concentration camps, but there's I think a better example of how that can expand as they expand their safe cities and as they partner with some other nations and cities to bring that type of surveillance and repression home. A friend of mine that works in San Francisco, he works in IT. He was driving to work. He noticed that one of the interns, she's from China, she's a student here on a student visa, she was walking all the time. So at the office one day he said, hey, look, I drive by you, I'm coming from the same place, I'd be happy to give you a ride. She says, no, I can't do that. And he asked, why not? And she pointed to her Fitbit and she said, because if I don't get my steps, they know that back home and they'll withdraw my student visa because I'm required to walk a certain number of steps every day. Now imagine that, she's a student halfway around the world and she knows she's being monitored back home, whether she's completing her steps. We had a demonstration where you could take an individual and without any knowledge at all who they were, put him in a Chinese city, and within 7 minutes, they were able to identify him and apprehend him out of more than a billion people, as you know, within 7 minutes, with their technology of facial recognition that is on millions and millions of cameras throughout almost every major city, and in a few years throughout virtually every foot of China. Last thing I'll share with you. Maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I had a chance to sit down with President Xi. I was a member of a congressional delegation. There were 4 or 5 of us, some senators and some congressmen. And I had a chance to talk to him about this thing called the Thucydides trap. I'm sure you guys are familiar with it, which says if you have an emerging nation and then an established nation, they will always come into conflict. And when you look at that over the last 500 years, about 80% of the time it's true. And I asked President Xi, I said, do you believe that? Do you think it's inevitable that the U.S. and that China would come into conflict, or can we avoid this? And he said, oh, no, of course we can avoid that. It's not inevitable at all. You had your sphere, we have our sphere, we have mutual interests, we can work our way through the challenges. And that was his reply. I had a chance to meet with him more recently, within the last year, and I reminded him of this conversation and asked him, do you still believe that? And you know what his response was this time? It was, well, we will see. Something different. Look, the Chinese people are good people. We don't want to repress or in any way hold them down, but their government does. And their government has been stealing and cheating from us and do it to their benefit. It's nonsense for us to allow that to continue. That's what many of us are about here today. Shali, thank you so much for the invitation. It's an honor to be with you.
We have him? Okay. Our next speaker is Kevin Freeman. He's a member of CPDC, and he's going to be talking about the economic war, and he is also associated with the Blaze TV. So this is going to be broadcasting to his audiences as well. Go ahead.
Hello there. Today I've got the privilege of joining the Committee on Present Danger as I'm speaking to an audience there. I understand from my friend Frank Gaffney, you've got a good group of people there, and I want to share with you about Unrestricted Warfare. This is a book that was published in 1999 by two senior colonels of the People's Liberation Army. It was the 50th anniversary when this book was published of the PRC, People's Republics of China, being formed. And at the time, China had the 7th largest economy in the world. It was barely the size of 10% of the U.S. economy. And they were working on most favored nation status for permanent trading relations with the United States, which was granted in the year 2000. At the same time, they began to implement the things in this book, Unrestricted Warfare. They began a program of intellectual property theft that in some years has reached $600 billion of theft. Regularly, it happens in the hundreds of billions of dollars annually. They began unfair trade practices and currency manipulation. They began to corrupt relationships both with Wall Street, with industry, but also with the U.S. government. In fact, in 1999, there were serious revelations of things that had taken place just a couple of years earlier in the election where President Clinton was reelected, the 1996 presidential election. At the time, 58% of Americans felt that this was a major scandal and believed that China had infiltrated our political system. It was proven by foreign intercepts. We'd intercepted through our intelligence agencies various foreign communications that documented an effort by the People's Republic of China to influence our election. There was $2.8 million of dirty money returned by the Democrat National Committee that had been put into the Clinton campaign. There were 20 guilty pleas. But the damage had been done, Washington was corrupted, and we have now, for 2 decades, seen the influence of China in the American political system. We've also seen the influence of China in industry, called Chimerica, and we've certainly seen Chinese influence in other areas, including Wall Street. Here we are 20 years later, and unrestricted warfare is in full operation. China dominates many industries, and American industry has been hollowed out. They are now, the Chinese economy is now number 2, or by some measures, the number 1 economy in the world. They went from 7th in the world to number 2 or number 1, following the techniques of unrestricted warfare. And today they have active operations in debt traps, intellectual property theft, a compromised IT supply chain, including their efforts to overtake the 5G markets. They have foreign students infiltrating American universities, Confucius institutes. They've been buying up assets in Hollywood with the idea of influencing American culture. They have the Belt and Road Initiative that they use to subvert nations surrounding them. There's a call internationally to de-Americanize the world and to remove the dollar as the reserve currency of the world. They have active spying operations and certainly a military buildup and various human rights violations. Now, the problem that I have, the greatest problem that I have with this is the fact that China has been funded in large part by the American Wall Street. A good example of that is what happened, I think, in 2014 with Alibaba. Alibaba listed on the New York Stock Exchange the largest initial public offering in history, and they raised $25 billion, most of it American money. What the Americans received in return for their $25 billion were shares in a Cayman Islands corporation that were really called a variable interest entity. A variable interest entity is questionable if it's even legal in China, but they allowed it and received $25 billion. Now, that's just one example, but the problem is even the Hong Kong Stock Exchange turned down this initial public offering because they felt there was no transparency and no opportunity for corporate governance. And the accounting systems of China are not to U.S. standards. Right now, there are 156 companies listed that are Chinese listed on American stock exchanges, and there are 600 more companies listed over the counter. There's more than $1.2 trillion of market capitalization in these Chinese companies, of which 11 of them are entirely state-owned and state-controlled. Another 33 of them have massive Chinese ownership, 30% or more. All of them are subject to the People's Republic of China control, or the Chinese Communist Party. Last year, 33 Chinese companies raised $9.2 billion on American exchanges. When we talk about IPOs, initial public offerings, do we realize that $9.2 billion of our money last year went to Chinese companies, and 4 of the 10 largest initial public offerings offered were Chinese? That's more than any other nation, including the United States. They raised more money in the top 10 IPOs than we did for our own companies. Now the problem is these Chinese companies can be tied to human rights violations, or our money could be used for a military building. They're oppressing religious minorities in China using money coming from Americans. So basically this is unrestricted warfare. What do we do about it? Well, you're doing something now. Attending a committee on the present danger briefing is a great step. But we have to educate all Americans to help offset the Wall Street and DC corruption that the Chinese have infiltrated us with. There's a new act called the Equitable Act that Senator Marco Rubio has put forward that would delist any companies from anywhere that fail to provide proper American accounting disclosure. Now, most companies survive this, but Chinese companies won't. They do everything possible to prevent Americans actually looking at the books. There are even laws that prevent you going and looking at the books. Another thing we must do is we must look for alternative supply chains. Whether it's from India or Vietnam or Latin America, we need to build American goods in places where the countries don't want to see America destroyed. And we've got to crack down on intellectual property theft and hacking. And we've got to support the Trump administration efforts to hold China accountable. In my lifetime, President Trump is the first president that dared hold China accountable. And so we're very appreciative of that. If you want to learn more about the research that we do, we have a new episode in the Economic War Room. It's a TV show. It's offered on Blaze TV. You can see episode 41 will be released this coming Thursday, and it's titled Underwriting Our Adversary. And I go into detail. What I've given you is a 6-minute briefing on this, but we'll go into great detail in that episode. You can find out more at economicwarroom.com. So I think my time is up, and I appreciate the opportunity to join you today. Thank you.
Okay. Next, I would like to invite Yashvi Patel, my best friend in the whole world, to come here and join me. First of all, probably the entire RHC membership here, they do know about her. Maybe some don't, some other people. But she is a legend. She is the #1 insurance agent in the world. New York Life is a biggest anyway. So as a result, it goes into that. So I went to one of her ceremonies that looked like a Bollywood production, where they were actually celebrating her as the highest producer. So it was in Switzerland. So that looked like a full Bollywood production over there. So, most of you can tell I like Bollywood. So anyway, a few things about her. when she came here, she did not speak English. She did not understand English too much, and she did all this on her own. And she's now in demand all over United States for giving inspirational speeches to women as to what they can do in their lives when you put your mind to it. So here is Yashri Patel, who will say a few words.
Thank you, Shelley. I'm absolutely honored and humbled to be here among Powerhouse, which, oh, hi. Thank you. Thank you, Shelley. No, I'm absolutely honored to be sitting among you and also business owners and all local community members. And Shelley, what can I say about Shelley? Shelley, when he puts his mind to anything, and since I've known him, he puts 100%. He does not sleep, by the way. I must say that I'm sure you must have experienced here when you get to know him a little bit more, then you would understand that. And I have experienced very well back in those days when there was 2011 when he asked me that, Jishi, you're gonna be part of this cut coordinate to Pakistan, and for that, he said, Jishi, let's go to Capitol Hill. So I made a trip in these high heels and walking up and down on the Capitol Hills with him. I was tired, but not him. Trust me when I say that. So I must say that he is absolutely amazing, and he does work tirelessly to make our life better. And I'm so proud to know him, and thank you so much for coming. I know it's weekend, and I'm just proud to know all of you, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you very much.
Okay, I think we are going to move to our next most important part of this evening, a discussion, a panel discussion with the owners, business owners in this area who were very heavily impacted by this Chinese invasion. And printed circuit boards, printed circuit board assembly, and I'm going to move to my seat there on the table, and we'll engage in this discussion. To put this in perspective again, in the late 90s, AVG started out in this sector, printed circuit boards and printed circuit board assemblies. We started out in 1979, 1980. So we were in that for about 20 years, and there are a lot of companies that came out of AVG, and they were entrepreneurs, and they started their own businesses. But there were a total of 250, like Joe Turek said, 250 shops in this area, Elk Grove and surrounding area, that 150 in PC boards and 100 in PC board assemblies. That got decimated, that got gutted in just a 4-5 year time frame. And out of those 250, get this number, out of those 250 companies that got gutted, that's about 150 of them were operated, owned by Hindu Americans. That was that big of a number. And today, I think, like Joe mentioned, something like maybe 15, 20, 40 or something like that is left. Around the country, overall, and that number, by the way, of Hindu American owned businesses in this particular segment applies the same ratio in overall the United States. Overall the United States, there were 3,000 businesses. And out of those 3,000 businesses, you know how many are left? 160. That's it. And out of that also, about 3,000, same ratio, over 1,500, maybe like 1,800 or of those companies were owned by Hindu Americans. So let's have a discussion and hear from those businessmen around this area who suffered at the hands of the Chinese attack. I say it's a premeditated murder. I coined the phrase, and I think Frank really liked that, so I put that in all other presentations. Premeditated murder. So that's incredible what they did. You see, it's all planned, very planned. 5 years, they made a plan that in 5 years they're gonna just gut it. So you come in subsidized by the Chinese government and sell the products at 1/3 the cost in the US market, less than the material cost. If you sell a board in the United States that all these companies were doing, just for example, for $10, your material cost is $3. What the Chinese did with the state subsidy and the whole plan, they started selling the board for like $2.80, less than the material price. So of course, one by one, you start hearing, and that's an interesting question. Why? Maybe it's because 1,800 of them were Hindu American owned, and we kind of try to be sort of pacifist and let's not just complain, let's just try to do whatever we can. And so, but those companies started going out of business, and there was an auction. We wanted to actually have a person here who was holding auctions. The equipment becomes idle. They go out of business, the equipment is idle. There was 2 auctions every week. There were close to overall $30 billion of equipment that got auctioned in a period of 2-3 years. And that China bought that for 1% or 0.5%. So if the, just take this example, if this equipment in a drill is $1 million, 1%, 10,000. They buy it for 10,000. They buy it for 5,000. I've actually been to auctions. I've seen that there were places where they bought it for $10. So all this equipment ends up being in China. So they got our equipment. From their perspective, it's a brilliant plan, but that's not how you conduct as a responsible citizen of the world. So let's hear from these businessmen. Okay, is this on? And we have also mics on for other panelists here as well. Okay. All right. The first person who you saw in a red uniform I'll go to is Bob Patel, the owner of Surya Electronics. So Bob, tell us a little bit about your company, and also if we have the tariffs, he's in the electronic assembly side. Not the PC board, but PC board assembly side. You heard his message, but let him tell you in person what he would like to tell our negotiators and President Trump.
Our company name is Surya Electronics, and we are close to our global. We are in business since 1983. So, talking about China, I'm not going to say everybody in China is bad. But definitely we had some bad experience. And now it is better?
Yes.
Okay. So we had a lot of customers, Fortune 100. And around beginning of 2000, I got a call from one of the buyers. And he says, are you aware that China has a cheap labor? And we want to go there, but we don't know how to do it. And if you can help us, we definitely want to continue business with you. But if you don't help, then we have to find out somebody who can do it. And there are people who are brokers. They are always coming to us. Now, we always, a little hungry in a business. So I said, definitely I can help you, but I don't know what it will cost, how it will work. So all I can tell you is I will go to China, set up the operation, bring the material here, and charge you 10% more for my fee. In 10%, I can give you an assurance that if anything is wrong, I'll fix it, and you will get completely tested working product. So around that time, first time, made a trip to China, not knowing where to go, what to do. Google wasn't there. So landed, stayed in a hotel, opened up the yellow page, and started calling the people. Half of the people cannot talk English. So it was a difficult task, but finally, with God's grace, I found people and started talking to them. They started explaining me, what are the different components, how it works. And even these people are in Hong Kong, they didn't like China. And they said that, different quality of the components can affect this and that. And anyway, to make a long story short, we started doing the business. I did for about a year and a half. And then one day the shipment came and the components were like, counterfeit. So when I took the product, tested, and this product was completely parted, so there was no way we can fix it. And my customer says, we won't take this product. Talk to China, and China says, well, I bought the same components from the same company. And during that argument, we lost about $750,000. So we decided, not to go to the China and work with it. In between, a lot of incidents happened. One of the
Bob, let's go into you are in electronic assembly. I think the boards are sitting right there. You could manufacture computer motherboards. Let's talk about that, and if there were tariffs on computer motherboards, as to what will happen to your business and where you would go.
Well, we definitely can build the computer motherboard. We are high tech. We have done a lot of complex boards, and even some of the local competition have sent some people to us when they couldn't handle it. If we start doing, if the tariff is sustained, and if the tariff comes like, the steel industry. See, right now, the China, anything coming from China in electronics, they charge the tariff. One of Fortune 100 company, I did a lot of work. They were in China, and now they moved to Mexico to take an advantage, not to pay the tariff. So that is a fight. So if the tariff is implemented like the steel industries, we can grow the business tremendous. Now, when the China competition happened in 2000 and now, we lost 50% of the employees because of the competition.
How many employees you had? How many employees did you lose?
We were about 110, and now we are around 55.
Okay, so 50%.
50% employees.
And if had the tariffs, either just from China or as a commodity like you mentioned, steel and aluminum, and some other non-tariff help as well, how many people you could hire, how many people could grow, how many people?
Well, depending on the size of the business, but I can predict it easily can grow from 200 to 400 employees.
Sorry.
No, I think you can, depending on the business size, but I can easily see it can grow in 2 to 400, it can go up to 1,000. How much business comes back?
Good, thank you. All right, thanks, Bob.
One last thing, now as a business leader, when you think about, like Vikram said, so many jobs can come back. Suppose the job comes back, what will happen? Now, we can grow the employee, but everybody sitting here will tell you it is very hard to find good people. So the leaders should think about it, how can we handle in the future? And future can be only improved if the government helps to train the people, because this is a high-tech industry.
So you're suggesting that the government should give some kind of credits for training people for the high-tech jobs?
They should give the training, credit. And they also, like in a lot of schools, there are a lot of smart kids, but they never get an opportunity. And they work in a restaurant like McDonald's, and they waste their talent. In order to utilize their talent, there has to be a training program which can help.
Thank you. Okay, next I'm going to go to Bridge Sharma. Bridge is a manufacturer of transformers, and let him put that perspective as well. This is a little different than the printed circuit boards and the printed circuit board assembly, even though part of it is printed circuit board assembly in terms of power supplies. But let him tell you the opportunity we would have to grow, to hire more people and grow that business if we have the tariffs. So, Rich.
Let me first of all explain my thanks to the team for what you guys are doing. It's a really great initiative to help this market. It's tremendous. We really appreciate your initiative.
Excuse me, could we have some quiet, please? Please have. All right. Thank you.
The name of my company is Power Volt. We manufacture transformers and DC power supplies. I started in 1986 from my basement. In a few years, we went through various ups and downs, a lot of efforts, a lot of positives, a lot of negatives, and we company steadily growing. We employ up to 135 people today. We can go through those ups and downs, business cycles, and so on and so forth, as long as we have a level playing field to compete. Now, from up to about year 2000 was okay. We went through those cycles, but we came out with flying colors without much problem because we were competing against the local competition. No problem, everybody is fighting the same field. Then we had the year 2000. That's when big China invasion came. And that invasion, including all the manufacturing industry, that's what hit us really hard. We were trying to do our best, but when we will call some of our customers, just to remind our fleet customers, we will call them to remind the Mr. Customer, quite sometimes you have an order from us again, repeated. It's time to order again. People say, no, thank you very much. We got for half the price or less than half the price from China, so we moved to China. Next week we'll call the other guy, same story. We'll call the other guy, same story. Within a very few, 1 or 2 years, our business was cut to less than half. The employee count was less than half. So we suffered so much. We came to so close to closing the doors. I was actually advised by my advisors, are you stupid that you still continue? I told no, I'm going to continue to try. We tried, and then the cycle changed. So in 2005, the cycle turned around, we got a little bit better, we came back to our feet. Today we are still here employing 125 people here in Illinois and Iowa. Now, that what happened with China at that time, even though we survived, but we are still suffering because of it. Even today, there's a lot of pressure for us to compete against those low prices from China. The when we quote our prices, or if we get the prices from China as a competition, those prices from China, they cost less than landing here, they cost less than our bill of material. How can we compete? There's no way. So we still continue to struggle. We have no hope. And from the previous administrations, we are wondering why nobody can see this what's happening. Thank God, the current administration, that they have the wisdom to see it, to feel it, and to act, to remedy it. And we really surprised that why the previous administration took that side, and we would like to thank the current administration, especially President Trump, that he has instinctively seen it and he's doing something against it.
So, Rich, just kind of take a hypothetical. They'll say we have sustained tariffs in that transformers and PC board assembly in power supply business. Right now you are one of the very few people who still make power supply. People will say you're crazy making power supplies in here. Who makes power supplies in the United States? So, what would if there were tariffs were put in? What your number of employees you could draw? How many people you could hire?
Yes, with the tariffs coming back in, it will make us very, very competitive. We can grow on the 145, still go to 400, 450 immediately within 1 year.
So this is the state of affairs in just one company, 125 to 400 to 500 employees. They could go if there were sustained tariffs in 1 year. 1 year. So it's one company. There's 50,000 companies like that.
That 25% tariff will give us a level field to compete, or at a little bit better than where we are today. But I will also like Bob Patel, he was recommending that there are some suggestions we would like to make. President Trump was talking the other day, there's a lot of money coming in the trade from the tariffs. And for once to bring the jobs back, we need to sustain it. We need to do something to our current way of manufacturing businesses and so on and so forth. We need to make some changes. We need to buy new equipment. We need to train people. We need to do so many other things to continue to sustain and grow from there on. My suggestion will be that 25% that is coming in the training can be given back to the small business, up to the businesses in the form of certain type of credits for different, whatever reason it may be. So the same money can be reinvested in the form of tax credit. The business can go in. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, next we go to Paresh Patel. Please go ahead and tell something about yourself and the position on tariffs and what you could do if there were sustained tariffs.
My name is Paresh Patel. I am one of the founder of Mega Circuit, which is located in Edison. We founded in 1985, and thank God that we have survived. But what the weather storm that we have seen starting from 2000 from the China is terrible to our industry. And we've been discussing back and forth, so no need for me to go into that. But I like to appreciate President Trump for taking a bold step towards imposing the tariff, and that is the one. And secondly, I like to thank his think tanks that they are sitting here. I'm sure they're gonna guide him appropriately to the further how we can impose try to bring the level field a little closer to the reality. So I'm sure I have a good faith on you guys, and will be heard, and we'll do that. So now I do agree that we be discussing the tariff, and I do agree that imposing tariff and sustained tariff will have help to our industry. and that will also bring the level field closer to the disparity that we are seeing. So now also we need to figure out some other avenues also beside that, which is the help promote the local manufacturer, encourage local manufacturing, and that will help to create another you know closer to the level field that will definitely help in the background also. Like we can, minority business has some manufacturing credit, something like that. Any creative thoughts that this leader can help us to distinguish and put it in a place that will also will help. So now, since we are talking about great initiative that we did, our industry did take some initiative in 2004 under the United States Printed Circuit Alliance, and one of the members sitting here, Mark, is right here, and we started that with the intention that we wanted to inform the government that what our industry is seeing back then. And not only that, but we were losing intellectual property back then, and that is a great threat to our national security also, which we talked touch base, with the Sali and Vikram a little bit about that also. So back then it was an effort made by us, but we didn't go any far. But now I think I'm hoping that with your gentlemen's help, we will gain some momentum back, and hopefully will bring revive some industry and bring some business back. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to hear a little bit on this 2004 alliance. What actually happened? I understand that you guys went to Washington, and what did you hear? What happened?
Well, basically we did go, and at that time, I guess we didn't have this serious threat that we see today, or we didn't understand that
How
that
to
is
lobby.
coming. Right, and we didn't have a good lobbying force. Maybe we didn't have a creativity that what we see today, and hopefully, I guess now we just don't have we have a fire in our backyard. So back then we did not have that. So unfortunately, I guess we didn't put enough weight also.
Thank you. Thanks.
If I could comment on that very quickly. One is that those efforts for you to come back, and I think Steve would back me up on this as well as others. Your efforts to come back to DC can make a difference. If you don't come back, then we don't have a problem. And we don't understand how to fix it. You guys are the experts. You guys are the people who understand it better than we do. Please keep doing that. I mean, all day long I meet with people that we end up trying to help, but we would not have been able to do that if they wouldn't have taken that effort to come back to DC. Thank you for doing that. Please keep doing it.
We will. Thank you.
Congressman, now you are one of the leaders of the Congressional Hindu Caucus, and so you'll be hearing a lot. So these are all members of the Republican Hindu Coalition, and so you're automatic have that connection. So, Gordon, I will come to you next. I'd like to tell you a little bit about this whole program, how it got together. So I thought of I think it's maybe only 2 weeks ago, maybe 10 days ago or 2 weeks ago, 1 week ago, I asked Haribhai, our Executive Vice President of RHC, thinking of having an event here with Steve Bannon and CPDC, and let's see if you can collect the people. And here there are only like 29 companies left out of the 150 or so. And so Gordon got to work, and within like 2-3 days, we had a preliminary meeting and then next meeting, and he has got the energy I like, and I like the way he operates and gets things done. So Gordon, mic is yours.
I would like to thank Sally for hosting this event to start with, and I would like to thank all the invited guests to come here and support us to revive this industry. My name is Gordon Patel, like he said. I'm the founder of the American Standard Circuit, which is a printed circuit for a company located in West Chicago. We founded this company in 1988, and we were only 5 employees at that time. We grew up to 150, and then we came back to 125 because we are a world leader into the technology. We decided to invest money into the technology and equipment and everything, and that's the reason we were able to survive. Basically. Otherwise, we would have been out of business a long time ago. Also, we tried to get the defense certificate. We are a real certified shop. We do a lot of defense work, and we are on AVL list for almost all defense contractors. In fact, we make part for F-35 fighter jets. I am in favor of the sustained tariff imposed by the government for the unfair business practice by the Chinese company and the Chinese government. Within last 20 years, Chinese company and government has systematically killed our manufacturing business and took away millions of high-paying jobs from us. Everybody knows, and it's not just the circuit board; it's been applying to almost all industries. I would like to request government to help us by bringing the manufacturing back to United States by helping us. Uh, right now, all the American companies are in survival mode. Basically, they don't have money to reinvest into the equipment or infrastructure. In order to compete with the Chinese, because they've been subsidized by Chinese government, they've been supplying them equipment, free real estate and everything. We don't have it. So I'm requesting you guys to just make sure you help us out by communicating this message to President Trump and telling us to provide us a battlefield where we can win. Just unfair practice. There is no way we can win against the Chinese. So help us out. Uh, Government can help us out by providing us some. I wouldn't say grant, but the zero finance loan or something. Maybe they become our partner, manufacturing partner, help us to buy equipment, provide us a land. It won't be easy to bring that business back here because we lost almost 95% of our business. Even if we bring 10% of the business back, we will not be able to manage that. That's where we're going to need the government's help. I think that's about it.
Thank you, Gordon. And once again, thank you for putting this thing together in such a short notice. Ashok Patel.
My name is Ashok Patel. I'm from Delta Precision Circuit. We are one of the co-partner of the Delta Precision Circuit, which was we to purchase the existing company back in 1996. 2 years ago, we shut down the company because we could not really continue with our business with this competition, which is, of course, we have all understood from China. I would like to say the tariff was necessary. It has been really for years. This is one of the necessary steps the presidents have taken, and I would like to see whatever other necessary steps the president can take and the administration, that would be really helpful to build up the industry back into this country. Our country's strength is measured by the industrial strength, and that is what is necessary for to rebuild this America again, to make this America great again.
Next, actually, I'm going to go to AVG's Chief Technical Officer, Raj Tiwari. He had a little different perspective than I had been thinking of as to what you talked about. But Raj, I want to tell you how this panel, how our great leader, Steve Bannon is, it didn't take him more than, again, 30 seconds to acknowledge that. So he knew exactly what you were talking about. So I felt like I'm talking to an engineer. So he's like a R&D engineer. He knows he could run an R&D engineering department. But he understood it very, very clearly that R&D goes where manufacturing is.
That's very true.
So please go ahead and talk a little bit about that.
Okay, so I am coming from a design development background rather than business background. So what I see happening in the last several years, our vendor base is shrinking in America. So we don't find enough vendors to get our components. To do any innovation, you need to collaborate with your vendors. Our customers challenge us, we challenge our vendors. And that's how we get great products. And unfortunately, with vendors shrinking, we are also losing skilled workforce because there's not enough people. That type of work is not being done. For example, LCD used in that panel, nobody manufactures that LCD here. So those kind of challenges are happening. So first we have lost manufacturing, pretty soon we'll lose competitiveness in designing the products.
Thanks. Thanks. I'm going to stay on the finished products. So I've spoken about our ABG's businesses that were in the circuit board and circuit board assembly. But Vikram would like to also tell you we faced another threat in 2004, 2005, even on intellectual property side, and that almost killed ABG, but we were able to survive that. So you want to talk a little bit about that, Vikram?
Sure. Yeah, so it's not just that back in the 80s and 90s, there's all these prominent businessmen around the panel discussion where China has come in and impacted us. As recently as 2004, 2005, as my father had mentioned, a lot of Chinese companies, they go out and they try and infiltrate, it's not just backwards engineering anymore, it's also infiltrating, in order to you have to buy some components from them because manufacturing has gone out quite a bit to China. They'll say, well, I need to know a little bit about what your system design is. I need to know how does your software work with your system? How does your, okay, well, give me the piece of the firmware that allows you to build that for me. So they end up stealing your information without you even knowing it piece by piece. And, unfortunately, and fortunately, I guess, for us, but that happened to us in 2004 as well, where we almost had to shut down ABG, and it was a major, major lawsuit against a Chinese company that stole all our intellectual property. Fortunately, after a 5-year battle, a lot of work, a lot of endless nights. We excuse my French, but we handed the Chinese their asses and basically,
Yeah, so actually that was a lawsuit in 2010. I almost became a lawyer, and so we won 42 counts. 42 counts is a lot of stuff I cannot disclose because it's still bound by confidentiality agreement. Even the judge could not know what actually final settlement was. But we won on all 42 counts where a jury held that they did steal our intellectual property. Okay, next I will go to Mukesh Vasani.
Thank you, Saleji, and thank you for having me on the panel and President Mr. Ben. I'm Mukesh Vasani, founder and CEO for Entron Group of Companies. We have about 4 different divisions. My journey is starting from actually born and brought from India, and with the vision or dream, I came to be a leader, business leader. So, in my journey, when I came and I started the company, and in 1998 with partnership, and grow the company up to 30 million with lots of employees and everything. And then our customer, who are public companies, Honeywell, gaming companies, WMS, and those people, they came to us and forced us to go either bring from China because they cannot compete. And we have the same customer base you can share, PC board companies. Customer, they say, we have to bring because they cannot compete. So ultimately, we didn't go with them. We didn't go China, but we bankrupt ourselves. Not bankrupt, but 30 million went back to 3 million. And we lost about 90% employees. So unfortunately, I left the partnership and started Aimtron. And we have now almost 300 people. But if we have a governmental support, definitely, with ITAR business, we have also, we have one company I think a lot of people may not know ITAR, is International Traffic and Arm Regulation. That resin does is controls all exports and imports about defense and government business. So one more thing I will request Congressman over here and administration that we should have some kind of restriction on ITAR related certification because if you look at the plane, more than 60% parts coming from still out of country. More than.
So one of the requests actually which is saying over there is, yeah, I'm glad you're covering that, that Chinese companies should not be given ITAR certification.
Correct. So that's also is my request to them, and then definitely we can bring the business back. My actually firm belief is with government supports and tariff to develop the infrastructure. What Gordon and other people says, with Bob also talked about workforce, skilled workforce, to support the American ingenuity to bring the business back. Thank you.
Last but not the least, speaker is panelist is Chandra.
Hello, I'm Chandra Dave from Excel Electronics. First and foremost, thank you very much for this and giving us the opportunity to present ourselves with these few ideas we have, and I'm sure your think tank has plenty of them. But to give our story, we started in '86, and with this downturn, we lost 65% of our employees. And we, as my colleagues mentioned, that we are all in survival mode.